Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review the What If episode. Episode 7, If Thor Was to Be the Only Child. Which... what if Thor did not exist? Because I wish that this episode did not exist. You know what? I felt really good about a lot of What If episodes. Yeah, there was some copying and pasting going on, but I'm like, you know what? These episodes are fun. I enjoy them. I like them. And then we get to this episode where I'm just like, why does this even exist? Why did I have to wait a week for this? They could have just tossed this out as an extra episode after another episode. If they were going to do a twofer, this would have been an episode to do a twofer with. Because I'm just I don't understand why this exists. Why this episode existed. This episode was stupid and a waste of time. And there was nothing writing-wise that had to really seemingly be put forth into this episode. They were going with some goofy routes that Thor has already done, so it doesn't feel like a drastic changing of this character. He just goes into a much more goofy realm of things, which I'm like, I think we've already had that. And I guess, really, without there being a Loki, I guess Thor has so much more time to shave now, I guess, also. Just... why? Why does this exist? Why does this show exist? This episode was a much... I was already griping about another review that I was going to put out, but then this also happened on top of that, and it just compounded my disdain of just going God, I'm just not watching, there was two shows that I'm like, these are the ones that I'll like. Out of all the stuff that happens, this will be a thing that I'll like. And then I go into these things and I'm like, God, both of these things, hands down, were just kind of and I was just like, man, this is not the way to end a day. So, really... the only importance about this episode is really just the Easter eggs of it all. To just be like, oh, hey, I saw this person and I know this person from other Thor movie. Or I know this person from Asgardian World. Here is also the thing that bugged the crap out of me. There is no closure moment from what happened from the last episode. What happened with the Surrey and the Pepper thing? Are they going to do that in season 2? Are they going to come back to that somewhere? No? There was no closure from it seems like they continue to set things up, and is the next season going to be a thing that continues from these stories? Or are we just going to continue and have a part 2 from these stories now? Because I thought, everything seemed to be bottled into this, but there's also this, thing where I'm just going, what is season 2 gonna be like? I have to question that now. Because it seems like there's some cliffhanger things that they're doing here that they're not resolving, and I'm like, okay... I don't know. So... here is the most condensed down variation of this episode, because it's an episode that should not exist. For some weird kooky reason, all these stars are to be in here voicing all this stuff, and I'm like, man, Disney is just throwing money around. Disney is throwing the money around for this episode. They have freaking Chris Hemsworth doing the Chris Hemsworth voice, and Loki's doing the Loki voice. And I'm like, man, and Natalie Portman's doing Natalie Portman, Darcy's doing Darcy, because they were already doing Thor: Love and Thunder anyway, so all these people were already here. The biggest problem that I have is there wasn't an Eric Selvig just kind of like, if he would have just been like sleeping, nodding off in the background and didn't say one word, I would have been like, okay, well, he's there. He's sleeping. And I'm fine with that. And they could have continued to make the joke that Eric Selvig was still sleeping in the van. And they could have kept referencing that to just say, oh no, the person didn't want to do the voice and whatever. We're just having him showing that he's sleeping in the van, because I would have been fine with that. What was Eric Selvig off being a non-clothed man somewhere? No, because they also kind of showed that this was kind of some conclusionary things from like Ragnarok, but it seemed like the first Thor movie, but then it also seemed like Ragnarok, and I'm so confused. Like, is this a world where a lot of stuff like did happen, didn't happen? Like, it seems like basically every single one of the Thor movies all happened regardless, and they probably ended the exact same way, with the exclusion of Asgard still seemingly existing. So I'm just scratching my head trying to put the pieces together of, we can make some consensuses that Loki did like start some things, let's just say. If Loki probably didn't exist in this world, we probably wouldn't have Loki villainous Avengers movie. But I'm trying to put all the pieces together to really just say that Loki, without there being a Loki, because there's a whole variant show about him, like that. I'm lost. So let's just go into the spoilers of this episode. I don't want to have to figure out the math of a world without Loki, and because it just doesn't rationally make sense in some points of things. But I guess everything just like, every single time that they drastically shift a world, all of a sudden we have this person that is even more welcomingly. Like, we had the whole Chadwick Boseman Star-Lord thing, where everybody was just loving Chadwick Boseman. Is that the same thing here, where like Thor didn't have Loki, and then all of a sudden Thor just became this like even nicer guy than he was, and so everyone just loved him? Is that what we're playing out here? Because that's what it seems like. So let's go into that double five. Let's go into that spoiler time, because it's about that time yet again. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we're going to spoil this episode. So, very beginning of the episode, we have both Darcy and we have Natalie Portman's character, Jane Foster. I'm not going with any like IMDb, whatever. I'm just winging it. So if I ill pronounce some things, or I'm just this episode shouldn't take any effort to do anything with. I should just be like, party and roll credits. Like, that's really what I should say or do or whatever, but I'm not. So we have Jane, who is to eventually go and see that there is to eventually be, from her research that she's doing, a presence that is to land upon Earth and to be the ushering in of a supposed alien race. So Jane chases after this thing while Darcy was flicking peanuts in a jar. Wow, that was exciting to see in this episode. But just wait till we get the layout of everything else. So Jane chases this thing down to have Thor appear upon Midgard, and he just endlessly throws a party. He endlessly just throws a party. We have a whole bunch of Easter eggs going on, like Howard the Duck is having a party. Korg is in this party. Drax is in this party. All the Guardians of the Galaxy members. We have God, what is his name? The guy from Thor Ragnarok, the big red horned guy that I easily said his name in Serta. There we go. Serta is bizarrely getting drunk, I guess, with the Statue of Liberty. Eventually, I think he ends up breaking her arm. He's like, whoops. Grandmaster Jeff Goldblum is bizarrely in this episode also. Having a party with all his Grandmaster people. So it seems that we are to reference that this is all the way through every single Thor movie, and things have gone off easily well without a hitch, right? To where Grandmaster isn't to have forfeited and had a rebellion against him because Thor. So all of a sudden we're having this party, but this party is getting way too out of control. Like, scrolls are in here. It's like an Easter egg's dream of a person who ends up taking way too much time to just be like, oh, well, I'm just going to do videos just about Easter eggs. This would be a dream for anybody who's to do that kind of content, because that's all that really matters, right? Is just the Easter eggs of this episode. It doesn't matter what this episode was. It just matters that there's a whole bunch of stuff inside of it, and that's it. Like, basically, I should have just come on here and just nodded off all the Easter eggs that are in this episode, because that's all that matters. So we don't get all of the Guardians of the Galaxy. I think we mostly just see Drax, but I don't know. There could be some other Guardians that could have been snuck in somewhere, but I don't know. I was honestly waiting for, like, because we had the Gold Girls from one of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I think it's the second one. And I was hoping, I'm like, man, wouldn't it be cool if Warlock came down and it was Thor versus Warlock, but they're saving that, I'm sure, for probably Love and Thunder, maybe? Or it has to be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, right? They gotta finally shell out that Easter egg money, right? That they freaking have been waiting to put and give people, that, hey, Warlock is coming, maybe. Because we've had to wait too freaking long for a third installment. But whatever. So I hope they give us that Easter egg and they resolve that whole thing in Love and Thunder, because that bugs the crap out of me. Like, resolve all your Easter eggs, freaking Marvel. Resolve all them bad boys. So, because they did a pretty good job for the most part. That's how excited I am about this episode to talk about it. I'd rather talk about an Easter egg that happened X amount of years ago that no one cares about. So everybody's like, you know what, this Thor's party is getting out of hand. All the S.H.I.E.L.D. members are just like, you know what, like, S.H.I.E.L.D., I guess, is back and running again with Rollo. So, like, I'm assuming that, like, Thor Ragnarok has happened, but evidently Rollo is still a S.H.I.E.L.D. member. Did they forget about that little nugget? Did Thor not having a Loki as a brother, like, all of a sudden change Rollo to be a S.H.I.E.L.D. member again? Because this is supposedly past Ragnarok, from what I'm assuming, right? Unless this is still, like, Thor period time, right? What the heck is this? What time period are we going to? Because I'm so lost. Because this doesn't make sense of when things are to be corrected for whatever reason. I just don't know. Whatever. Anyways, so S.H.I.E.L.D. is to be upset with Thor, and evidently Nick Fury had gotten injured trying to stop Thor from partying. So all of a sudden, Maria Hill is just like, you know what, we need to eventually just stop all this partying going on. It's gotten out of hand. And so all of a sudden, they send in Captain Marvel, of all people, to try and stop Thor from partying. And so Thor ends up calling Captain Marvel a party pooper. And so now there's these whole scenes where Thor is to put his Mjolnir on top of Captain Marvel, which again, I'm like, when is this done? Shouldn't he have Stormbreaker? Why does he have Mjolnir? Did Mjolnir never break from Ragnarok? Is he... Wait a minute. If Loki never had... If Loki never existed, which technically he still does, he's still Laufey's son, and he comes to us as still Loki. So wait a minute. Let me get this straight. So Odin, in this story, gave back Laufey his son, but Laufey still named his son Loki regardless, which I cannot buy that at all. Plus, also, there is that joke where Thor is to mention that Loki is still his brother from another mother, and I'm just like, so this is still... Like, they're still, like, the best of buds, or what, but I'm just, like... Could we explain some stuff here? Does Thor not having Loki keep Mjolnir intact? Is that the thing that we're also saying here? Is there a huge amount of retcon just going on? Like, I'm just so... Bah. Like, also, what happened to Hela? Did Thor just easily beat Hela? Wouldn't have Hela just have been accepting of Thor? Because Serta did. Seemed like a number of other people were accepting of Thor. Did Hela just come in with Thor with open arms and just accept him? Because it's like, oh, well, I don't have another brother to fight over? Or maybe Odin would have told Thor all along about Hela because he was the only offspring, whatever, of her other child of Odin, let's say. Let's say that correctly. Whatever with this episode. Just... What if... for this one. So, we have Howard the Duck splashed in here for whatever reason. Just say random lines, because maybe they had some extra lines from Seth Green from the other episode that they just spilled in here. Once you go quack, you never go back, you know what I'm saying? So, once you go duck, you don't give a right? So Captain Marvel tries to take down Thor, and then they just consistently have these battles with one another that just kind of lead into these mood points of just like, dude, like, no one's going to eventually beat whoever, even though Thor is supposedly the strongest Marvel character there is. Even though there's people that always say, oh no, like, Captain Marvel, there's proof that this exists, that who is the strongest. And it has nothing to do with, like, who anything is. Like, they've already cemented that Thor is strongest there is. Like, Hulk, I would say Hulk is strongest there is. But what do I know, right? I just like Hulk more than Thor, like, in all brutal honesty. I think Hulk is strongest there is, because he says it. Even though Thor's like, strongest Avenger. Whatever. Anyways, so pushing on. So, what ends up happening is Natalie Portman, Jane Foster, is to eventually go like, well, hey, since Thor exists, and since Loki exists, which he shouldn't, he should have a different name, and all of these things technically do exist. Shouldn't Odin exist? Shouldn't Frigga exist? And Heimdall exist? So Jane Foster calls Heimdall to Earth, which why would Heimdall waste his freaking time doing this? because he should be guarding the Bifrost thing, but that's just me, right? So Jane calls Heimdall, and she's like, Heimdall, make me Thor. And Heimdall's like, no, that we'll save that for Love and Thunder. You know what I'm saying? No, Jane goes, and she goes to, of course, Asgard. And then so Jane calls up Frigga and is like, hey, Frigga, how about you go and you stop your son from partying? And so now Frigga is to go and do this weird magical call to Thor and say, hey, Thor, what are you doing in Midgard? What are you doing there? And Thor's like, oh, well, we're doing a lot of research on Midgard. We're, like, figuring out a lot of things about Midgard. We're getting a lot of knowledge download, if you know what I mean, Ma. And so all of a sudden Frigga's like, well, really? I want to go see, like, I want to find out every single thing that you've learned on Midgard. And I also want this place to be, like, this Midgard to be, like, spotless. And hopefully you haven't been partying over there. So then all of a sudden, Frigga, like, goes away, and then Thor is to desperately, like, a guy that is after every after party of his life, who's to realize that his parents are coming home soon. And so now Thor is like, hey, everybody, help me clean up. Help me clean up. And I'm like, who would care about coming onto a planet that they've never really been to, and now they're going to help you clean? No, they just came for a party, bro. They're not going to come and freaking clean up a place that they weren't going to want to even spend 2 seconds to after this party was over. They were there to thrash the place. And they weren't thinking about anything else because that is not the place that they hang their hat every day. So, but yeah, so S.H.I.E.L.D. and Maria Hill and Coulson and Rollo, for still some reason that still baffles me, sends in Captain Marvel to try to resolve this thing, and she can't resolve this. So it takes Frigga to come on to Midgard to eventually see Thor, who's bizarrely, like, chalkboarding it away with all of this Midgard knowledge and just pretending that he's putting together some front and some whatever about some party that didn't happen. And so we also have these moments where, like, Loki is calling Jane Foster and like all this goofy stuff, and it still seems like Thor is to want to get with Jane Foster. Even in this world, there's not some alternate thing where all of a sudden, like, Thor is like, hey, Darcy seems like a fun girl. Hey, maybe me and Darcy, you know? Maybe Darcy will become Thor one day. You know what I'm saying? There isn't that slight tweak of story. Then all of a sudden Thor is to like Darcy because maybe he's a much kinder, gentler, softer Thor. I don't know. Maybe he was after Eric Selvig. Maybe he was like, hey man, like, Jane is cool and all, but that Eric Selvig though. That guy runs around Stonehenge without clothes, you know what I'm saying? I want me a piece of that. But anyways, so eventually Frigga finds out that Thor was having a party at Midgard, and so eventually Frigga takes Thor back to Asgard and stops the whole partying and ends this whole thing. And so, like, really just towards the end of this episode, we end up finding out that it seems that Thor, after he kind of wants to go and still date Jane at the end of this, we think that all things has been right in the world of Thor without Loki as his brother. But we end up finding out something different, that instead, we bizarrely have Ultron Vision, where it seems like this Ultron Vision has every single Infinity Stone, and that this thing is a huge, colossal, giant threat thing that is probably going to wipe out existence. And we're naturally assuming that that's going to be the thing that is just going to just kill all. Because Ultron was strong enough. Vision was a strong enough character. And I can't expect Wanda, eventually taking out Ultron, Vision, Infinity Stone thing. I don't see that happening. Because if that were true, then Wanda could have like easily taken out like Thanos with Snap. Like, so we're going up against Robot. Why wasn't Ultron Vision in Zombie episode? Why? Why wasn't he in that episode? That would have made a lot of sense. But no, they didn't go that route. Here's me thinking here, why I'm so disappointed in this episode, and they had a good idea for another episode that could have easily like wiped out everybody if they would have done that whole zombie thing with Vision, but no, they didn't do that. Now, did they? No. I'm getting ticked about another episode. What kind of stuff is that? So yeah, episode boo. I hated it. It sucked. It really was just an Easter egg episode that felt lazy and felt like a filler episode. And this is Disney. Every episode should be like, man, that was crazy. Man, that was sick. Man, that was a great story. And instead, it just feels like anything else from Disney Plus, where it's just like, meh. It's kind of like a lot of their shows, their Marvel shows, where like you have like Falcon and Winter Soldier's like, man, I can't wait till next week. Where it's like, this show is like, I wonder what kind of thing we're gonna get next week and if I'm gonna care about it. Like WandaVision was kind of one of those where I was like, I just don't care about that show. From pilot on, I was like, I don't care about this. Like it doesn't feel like something I'm going to enjoy. And then Loki was kind of like, I guess I'll watch this thing, this arduous process that has so many things where you have to kind of like try to do the math in your head about what's going on. Kind of feels like this episode where you're kind of doing the math of it. It's Loki all over again. So I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.